let's turn over to Egypt. This is a very, very troubling situation. And speaking of international ramifications, this may actually be the most important one. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screens. A very sketchy incident that happened between Israel and Egypt. Now, Egypt said one of its border guards had been killed at the Rafah crossing in Gaza after reports of an exchange of fire between the two militaries. Israel confirmed, quote, a shooting incident had taken place on the border on Monday, saying that it was, quote, under review, and the discussions are being held with the Egyptians. The Egyptian armed forces say that they are investigating the incident. An Egyptian official is trying to play down the shooting, saying it was, quote, minor and of no political significance. But we do have an Egyptian border guard who was killed. Now, the circumstances of which fire was even exchanged is really unclear right now. But the reason why this is very important is that we have to separate a couple of things out. Egypt is a military dictatorship, and the way that their government responds is obviously profoundly important. But Egypt is also a very proud country with tens of millions of people who live there and who can read the news and who have been increasingly upset about the Israeli action on Gaza. When we combine that with an Egyptian military or an Egyptian border guard who was killed here in some sort of crossfire incident, this is the first confirmed death in exchange of fire now for a long time. Now let's put this up here on the screen because this is what's very important. All of this is in the context of the collapse, really, of the 1979 Camp David Treaty, because deploying, quote, more than 4 infantry battalions or positioning tanks, artillery is already a breach of Camp David, and Israel currently has that entire division that is operating along the Egyptian border. And as tensions between the two increase, we don't know exactly what prompted the exchange of fire here, but we can guess it was probably something, some sort of incident, maybe either trigger happy. Regardless, both sides have not released any information. And Krystal, the worrying part of this is that any flare-up of kinetic action between the two, I mean, it's almost difficult to describe like how important this is and why we focused on it now for several months. All U.S. foreign policy, 1948 to basically 1979, was how do we stop the Egyptians and the Israelis from fighting each other?
That's right.
Camp David was one of the greatest achievements of U.S. foreign policy that had a long-lasting consensus. We had the peacekeepers in the Sinai. We had decades of conflict that was in the region. We almost had a full-blown nuclear exchange during the Yom Kippur War. Encourage people to go and to read about that. This is a area of deep tension, and the people involved have not forgotten about that. Now, it's been, basically we've paid them off. We keep paying $3 billion a year to try and keep peace. But this conflict has bubbled things up to the surface. And as we all learned in 2011, things can explode at any time in this area, and we do not want to see incidents that are like this.
So Camp David basically took Egypt off the table in terms of being a military defender and pursuer of the Palestinian cause. Obviously in the West, it wasn't as heralded. Jimmy Carter won Nobel Peace Prize for those negotiations. In the Arab world and on the Palestinian side, viewed very differently because, again, basically put Egypt in the U.S. corner. And with the amount of money that we send them, send in Israel huge amounts, and Egypt is just down the list from them, that means that we basically get our way and get what we want with regard to Israel when it comes to the Egyptians. So there is a huge disconnect between the Egyptian political leadership and these, rank and file soldiers who were there on the border, probably all of whom are deeply sympathetic to the Palestinian cause and are now seeing this slaughter that is happening there in Rafah right on their border. So we don't know exactly what happened here. Both sides of the political story here in terms of Egyptian leadership and Israeli leadership are downplaying the incident. They're saying, we'll look into it. This was, not a big deal, effectively, is what they're saying. The reports on the ground are that Palestinian resistance fighters were somehow involved in this as well. So you're okay, well, did the Egyptians come to their defense? What exactly is going on here? There were rumors of a second incident in which was being reported by Egyptian media sources in which IDF soldiers may have been killed. Those have not been confirmed, but worth putting out there that there may have been a separate additional incident. Conflict between the Egyptian military and the IDF. So it shows you, something we've been talking about for a long time, which is the extraordinary tension that is bubbling right here that could have additional follow-on chaotic fallout here that is very difficult to predict how this would all go.
Yeah, exactly. And, in terms of, again, what we know about all of this, it is all just continues to be sketchy. There was a similar thing that happened. Let's put this up there, please, because these are some of the details that we can give you. It says that Israeli soldiers from the 401st Armored Brigade attempted to cross a site near Rafah, claiming to be, quote, pursuing saboteurs, is some of the detail. They say that the Egyptian forces then engaged with them. According to them, they actually killed an Israeli soldier and injured 7 others, 3 of them critically. This is based on Egyptian news reports. Now, the Israelis have not released any killed Israeli soldier or 7 who are injured. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not true. They then say that they retreated behind a barrier and reported their incident to security commanders in Tel Aviv, who then began communication with Cairo. This just demonstrates that the taking over of that crossing was already an extraordinary international incident. Egypt actually retaliated in terms of aid. They also have been bearing a lot of the brunt in terms of funneling of humanitarian aid. They are a critical part of a lot of these peace negotiations, which are happening right now. Just looked and saw the current parties that is currently happening with regards to that hostage deal. Egypt is party to the latest proposal that has been put forward. So this is Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, just again to underscore how critical the Egyptians are. So when we have a dead, Egyptian soldier, I just want to say the Egyptian military may not care. They say it's not of political consequence, but the Egyptian people may certainly care when one of their guys is killed, and it could lead to more pressure on a lot of these places. That's just, the problem is that we tend to think of these Gulf dictatorships or these Arab dictatorships as top down. But what we all learned is that actually the people, in 2011, they certainly can make their voices heard. And that a lot of these regimes, the way that they keep their power is by balancing popular opinion. And if the popular opinion starts to really go against them, you'll see that even though the Saudis want to just wash their hands. They don't care about Palestine. They just want, the government at least, they want to make a deal with Israel, get all their weapons and move on.
Yes.
But their people, and this is tens of millions of people live in Saudi Arabia, they're not cool with that at all.
Yeah.
UAE is very similar. So a lot of these people have to balance that popular opinion with their policy. And that's actually what's constraining, again, more and more. It's isolating the United States, let alone Israel.
Yeah, I mean, the Jordanians even to a greater extent, because again, this is a country that we send a lot of aid to, so that they'll do our bidding. It's also a country with a massive Palestinian refugee population. The Queen is Palestinian. Literally. I mean, there's huge Palestinian influence in terms of the population, huge disconnect between the population and the political leadership. So that's why you see the political leadership will put out these statements that are very sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, but they don't actually do anything about it. That's their attempt to try to placate public sentiment in their countries, because even though, these aren't democracies in any real sense of the word, they still are subject to those pressures. So here you have an extraordinary situation where, again, the Egyptian soldiers who are charged with being there on the border and who are seeing with their own eyes the horror that's being inflicted on Palestinians, a group of people with whom they share deep sympathy, may not share the same political priorities that the Egyptian leadership does. So this is one to keep an eye on.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.